Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Understanding Global Trade. Now, most of you might learn before, either in the education or any of the exposure in the markets, about what is international trade, how does it affect the economy, and how do people even get into this. But practical scenarios and real time use cases is something which everyone craves to understand, and that's where learning happens. Now, to give a short brief, a short tutorial, a go through on what is international trade. So, this is our first episode towards learning or working towards global trade or understanding imports and exports. And this we're gonna do it through Blinkers. I know most of the people are still depending on the export gurus, so called, giving them lakhs of rupees just to sit in a few classes and understand from them with zero practical exposure. But come on, this is the new generation where everything is technology driven, and unless and until you take things under your control, no one is going to do it for you. And that's what I believe when I hear about this so-called export gurus, classes and stuff, or people who say I have leads, you take it and you do. So that's not gonna how it works. You got to understand the market first. You have to be self-prepared to get into it. And that's what we're gonna do today in our first episode on understanding international trade. So, to give a short brief for those who have not yet been exposed to, international trade is more on cross-border movements of either goods or commodities or services. But let me give you a practical scenario of how do you train yourself going forward instead of listening to anyone's videos, of attending anyone's classes, because it's time for you to do things by yourself. Now, that's where I'll just help you go through Blinkers. As you can see, okay, all you gotta do, search for Blinkers, okay, and then you just need to create your account, as you can see. And once you're done, so this is the ideal dashboard where you have your Blinkers agent. Now, what the agent does, agent is pretty well aware of complete import and export as a process. It is updated with the real-time transactions or cross-border movements happening, followed by the latest market news, which helps it understand and predict the trade calls. So you can consider it's a combination of n number of so-called trade gurus, but with the real-time scenario. So that's what Blinkers is for you. Let's ask the same question. Perfect. So this international trade as a concept, as you can see, we do have detail about what does international trade mean. But to give you a short explanation, it's basically the commodity movement or the service movement happening between two different cross borders. And there are different types of international trade again. One is import, when you're procuring something into the country, and one is export, when you're selling something out, and another one is interport. So what happens over there is you first import, repackage, or is the labeling if needed, and then re-export it. So you act like a median in between. So that's interport. More often that is also done where freight charges. More situations there are lower tariffs in a certain country, import is done to those, the repacking goes to some other country, and that's where it benefits. For example, if you want to sell something to China from India, it's crazy. But if you're selling to Vietnam and from Vietnam you're selling to China, that's a lot easy, and you would save money. That's by where repacking or re-export works in. To give a short advantage of what benefits does import and export give, it basically affects complete ecosystem as such. Why the more you export, the greater the economy rises, and the more you import, it has the vice versa effect. And that's where government also promotes a lot of exports, and for import it does provide a lot of tariffs so that you reduce the import of certain commodity product. A short background of import and export. To get into a little more details, what happens, or let's say is a restricted export, how does it affect the domestic market? Because this is one of the common asked by a lot of people, where the government has banned this particular commodity, or even we as a common general users, why is the prices even increasing? It doesn't even make sense. especially certain commodities like onions, tomatoes, we might have seen a lot. Obviously, those are seasonal driven, but at the same time, it does affect commodities which are non-seasonal too, very stable for us. For example, rice. Now, what do people or what does government do is wherever they see a lot of export happening into foreign markets. So when you do an export, the price of the commodity increases as the export value is quite high when compared to what you're buying in the domestic market. So when the commodity price is increased, the domestic price also increases. So let's say a capacity of India to ship a certain variety of rice is, let's say, around 10 million metric tons. And out of 10 million metric tons, 6 to 7 million is being exported, 3 to 4 is being in the domestic use. Because the export is giving a lot more fruits, most of the people tend to do the export rather than supplying in the domestic, which reduces the supply in the domestic market. Because of which, what government does is it does add tariffs or duty on the, which makes a lot of traders stop trading at the particular time or even a commodity movement. So when this happens, commodity piles up in the domestic market, and when that happens, prices drop in the domestic market. So that's how government does control. A few ways or reasons why it does, which we obviously feel a bit unsafe, is also where if let's say there is some elections going on and you're gonna distribute a lot of low value or low price commodities in the domestic market, for which government needs to have stock. So government wants to procure that at a very low cost, whereas the market price is pretty high or the minimum selling value is also pretty high. So what this is gonna do is, I'm gonna ban all the export of this from India. So the domestic value drops because there is a lot of commodity piled up. And once this happens, government procures it from the domestic market, it supplies. Usually this is done at the time of elections so that everyone is happy. But the people who are doing the business or, in global trade, they have the effect of no business season at that time. So this is one of the reasons where domestic prices are quite affected, export prices. But at the same time, when we talk about what other benefits can it offer Indian markets is, say if it is a seasonal based business, and that is where commodities are procured at a lower price and stored and exported when the market prices are high, something which most of the traders do, and especially with respect to agri is where this goes. This is a brief, import and export or international trade as such, but moreover a key important point on why does even price fluctuations happen in domestic market and export market? Because most of the traders are still on the benefit of question. Prices are increasing. I don't know why. Prices are decreasing. What to do? In fact, we, the general common users, we also are worried. Why are the prices even increasing? It doesn't even have any logic behind it. But no, there is a logic behind it. Now that's totally unexpected. Demand and supply. That's where global trade plays a major role even in our domestic day-to-day life. Well, that's more of the topic of understanding the international trade. But let me help you understand how Blinkers also solves this for you. So, although it does give a brief about what happens in international trade, you can also ask the same question to Blinkers. Let's say, over here I've been quite specific that why does this happen in agri as such, because that is quite volatile in nature. And these are the main reasons what we also have, although I couldn't speak on a lot of things. But one is weather and climate. As mentioned, it's again a seasonal thing. Government, trade and policies, that's the crazy stuff. But that's one of the main thing I would say. Currency exchange rate, obviously when you're dealing with cross-border, your trade partner or trade, if there are any internal market crash which is happening, let's say you are shipping goods to Myanmar, or Myanmar is a quite volatile market, but let's say you are shipping goods to US and there is a crazy drop to US dollar, they wouldn't accept any of import going on over there. So it directly affects your ability to get into imports and exports. So that's where currency exchange volatility matters. And then we also have energy and input cost. It's basically your manufacturing cost or production cost, which again is linked to the government on how much they are charging and how much. So yeah, we are all part of a certain ecosystem. Then we do have freight and logistic costs. It does fluctuate, but not volatile in nature unless and until there is some global dispute happening, just like the current scenario where we are having some disturbances in the global market and speculations future markets low. If most of the times where we do know that, for example, in India, if there any bill being passed towards agri or international trade or anything with respect to cross-border trade, before that, a lot of calls, everything is on hold so that people are waiting for the new policies to roll out based on which they can decision. Most of the times people blindly trade and their goods get stuck because of certain change in policies. One of my client I know very well, he was shipping rice to an African country and there was a sudden ban purchase of Indian rice to that particular country. His cargo was stuck. He had to pay an extra duty and get it clearance and sell it in the domestic foreign market. Although he made loss in it, but that is how business is. You make money, you lose money. But at the same time, it's again totally government dependent. What happened? Maybe around 15 to 20 days later, government has started accepting rice for that particular market. But again, at a duty of 15%. So that's where government plays their roles of buying and selling or maintaining the supply and demand. But at the same time, how does it control it is through this. So these are the main things ideally what we need to keep in mind when we are getting into import and export as a chapter. But that's pretty much it. So if you also want to understand a much more deep why exactly this happens, what are the direct effects of it, let me show you what Blinkers can also do. So with Blinkers, all you gotta do is ask. Listen, until you ask, no one would say, because we expect you to know. That's where Blinkers come in, where he is ready for you. You just need to ask. So yep, as mentioned, liquidity and price discovery, fluctuations in agriculture commodities, leverage, margin trading. So these are the few things that does come under consideration when we speak regulations in future markets. But yeah, you can also dive in detail into each and every point to understand why exactly that happens. And the why is this very important is because when you deal in, conversation with your buyer, everyone is pretty smart in this market. You are importer or you are even domestic exporter. Everyone is pretty smart in this market. They have their own calculations on when to buy and when to sell and what points to put forward for a strong negotiation. So unless and until you are updated with a strong AI tool, let's say for Blinkers, who is giving you a current update or latest news on what's happening in the market, that would ideally give you a point towards or strong backing on how to negotiate even in your trade. In fact, you can also what's happening in the current market with respect to any particular commodity, and it does help you and understand the price fluctuations or volume movements. So that's towards a later episodes is where we would understand how to even do that, why do we understand. But as of today, what's international trade? It's basically the commodity across borders, either goods or services. So that's more international trade. And why is it important? Obviously, it's because either you don't have something in domestic market or you have something excess in domestic market. So that's a simple logic on to understand why does it even happen. So great, happy for the first episode. And any doubts, anything, please reach out. Do like, share and subscribe. And if you find this helpful, we are always happy to help you. Thank you.